All right, welcome to Be the Market Expert, and let's kick it off with this thing. I got two Zillow stories to start, and this one says judge denies Compass request to stop Zillow's listing policy. All right, cool. So Compass filed the suit last summer and asked the court to stop Zillow from enforcing its listing access standards. And in the ruling, the judge said the Compass has not shown a likelihood of success. All right, so check this out. So as we go through and we look at this, what we know is this: we know that Compass is doing some things out there in the world so that they can control more market share, and that's just really what it boils down to. Hey, we're going to do some things, and those things that we are trying to do is going to hopefully help us take more market share and keep more business inside of our four walls. Which, at the end of the day, market share is what all of us are trying to accomplish. We just do it in different ways. And so, with what Compass has done, Compass said, hey, here's the thing. We want to keep all of our listings inside of our silo, inside of our brokerage house on our website. Okay, cool. So, what this looks like is this. This looks like Compass goes in, they enter into a listing, and the only way to find that listing is to go to compass.com or whatever their URL is. Well, what Zillow has done is Zillow has come out and said, hey, here's the deal. Do whatever you want, right? Like you guys can go through as long as it's in the best interest of your clients and your clients accept it. Like what we don't care, have fun. But if you're not going to immediately put it onto our platform so that we can get it in front of the eyes of the people that we service, we're just not going to show the house at all. If you do come to us, right? So what this is looking like is this. So I think that one of the stances that Compass is trying to take is this: outside of, hey, we want to keep most of the stuff inside of our four walls in our brokerage house in the silo of our website. They say that, well, hey, we also want to be able to test the markets. We want to be able to go through and put our listings on our website to see if this price point actually makes sense before we put it out to the general public. Whether that's real or not, who knows, right? Like you might get a seller that says, "Hey, we want to list it for, $1.2 million," and you're like, I think it's like 1.15. But let's test the market. Let's take it. Let's just put it at that 1.2 and let's see what kind of interest we have before we put it on the MLS, which obviously syndicates out to Zillow. So that's one stance that I believe that Compass is trying to take. This as no, no, no. This is in the spirit of making sure that we're taking care of our clients. And Zillow's like, no, 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 no. This is in the spirit of you taking your product and keeping it on your website and keeping it away from the people that come to our website. And so Compass filed the lawsuit, right? They went through and they said, hey, judge, listen, these guys, they're trying to bully us so that we have to use their website. And obviously the judge says, like, well, I don't know if that's what they're trying to do, but it's their website. They can do whatever they want. And that's where the judge is landing right now. So the reason why I bring this up is because this is very, very interesting in the landscape of where the future of real estate is most likely going. And so when we look at this and we're having these conversations, guys, I think that what's important is this. We're going to see the evolution of real estate go further and further and further, especially with AI and everything else that is happening. All right. And so we know the Compass had this big merger where they went and they purchased a bunch of other brokerages, Coldwell, ERA, Better Homes and Garden, Sotheby's. Like they purchased these brokerage houses and they folded them into Compass. What's also interesting is when you see Anywhere, which was the brokerage house that was holding a lot of these, their CEO has now stepped out. Compass has now elevated a new CEO over all of this. And so we're going to see, we have not even begun to see how this thing's going to play out. But what I do believe, because why not, is that Compass is doing all this for more market share. Obviously, they're going out there buying real estate agents, bringing them into their brokerage house so they can have more market share. And more market share means more listings, means more business. But here's the thing: we are now the number two largest brokerage in the world. We are the largest franchise model in the world. And so what you do is you have Compass, you have us, and we don't know what the other two or three brokerage houses that make it out of all this is. But this is where it gets interesting. If we're all just taking our listings and we no longer go into the MLS, and you have to go to kw.com, you have to go to compass.com, you have to go to insert whatever else here.com, and nothing's on the MLS, which means nothing else syndicates out to Zillow. which also means that the consumer has to come directly to the brokerage for listings. And this is why being a part of a large brokerage house matters with what this thing is looking like it's going to shape out to be. It's going to be a battle of the large brokerages. And what you're most likely going to see if this thing keeps playing out is you're going to see these small brokerage houses that, maybe do 10 listings a quarter. Some of them are only doing 10 listings a year, right? And they go through and they're going to fold into these other brokerage houses because that's where all the listings are. Because you're not going to go to the MLS anymore. You're not going to go to Zillow.com. You're not going to go to these third-party aggregators of information because no one's sharing it anymore. They're keeping it on their website. And so then you have to go directly to these websites. This is going to get interesting. And again, this is just one of those dominoes where now that, Compass is set or Compass is coming out, they file this thing and the judge says, oh no, Zillow can do whatever they want. What does Compass do next? Does Compass go through and do they spend more money into their AI, into their website to syndicate out, to go after Zillow a little bit harder to syndicate out their info? Do they fold and they remove it off this platform, which I don't think is real? We're going to continue to watch this. This is going to get very interesting. Second thing I said, we're going to talk about Zillow twice now, is Zillow and Redfin have been ordered to produce documents in the $100 million rental syndication antitrust case. All right, cool. So this is what this thing boils down to. Zillow literally went through and paid Redfin $100 million. It says, hey, multifamily listings, don't syndicate these anymore. Just let us do it. Like they literally paid so the competition would walk away. And so the judge has ordered through the FTC, so the Federal Trade Commission, and the Attorney General out of Virginia, Arizona, New York, Connecticut, Washington, many other places. They have taken these two different lawsuits. There's two lawsuits, and they filed them together. And this is big. This is really big, right? When we look at this, we have to think that what's Redfin? Redfin right now is Rocket Mortgage Companies. I don't know anyone watched the Super Bowl. It's Rocket Mortgage Companies now. And so you have Rocket Mortgage, you have Redfin. It's one company. The Redfin CEO is no longer the CEO anymore. Now it's all under Rocket Mortgage. And so they took this money to no longer compete against Zillow. And so now we're going through and we're going to see how this thing plays out. But I think this is the importance when we talk about antitrust, right? We just went through our own antitrust, right? We just went through, as Keller Williams, we settled the buy side before we settled the seller side, 2 years ago. And antitrust is not going to go away. And I think this is very important for everyone on the call. While we're looking at it like this, and like this is $100 million, and who knows even what this thing turns into now that it's got a lot of people's attention. Guys, we got to make sure that we are going through and we are not having conversations that is going to mislead the public, right? Like for the commission piece, right? The seller doesn't pay your commission. Commissions are negotiable, but your buyer is responsible to pay your commission. We cannot mislead the public, right? This thing's going to go through and they said, well, hey, they just paid money so someone would walk away. We also see these ones where you're getting money for vendor partnerships, right? Like we have to be making sure that we're on the up and up and that we're not doing anything around unearned income. And that's what this is. This is unearned income. They literally paid a company to no longer compete against them. And that raised some red flags. Obviously, their lawyers thought it was A-okay, and yet it wasn't. So we're going to keep watching this thing as how this thing unfolds. This is big dollars, and we'll kind of see, we'll kind of watch it. All right. This happened. U.S. House votes to pass the Housing for the 21st Century Act. All right, cool. So this legislation, which enjoys broad bipartisan support, aims to increase housing supply. All right, so let's go through. Let's look at what broad looks like. 390 to 9. 9 opposed. 390 Republicans and Democrats and independents got together and they said, this is a win. All right, so what is this? We're not going to read through this article. What this is an act about getting more housing built faster and cheaper. All right, this is what this is. So as we're looking at this, this is faster, cheaper, more. They're going to reduce red tape. They are going to encourage zoning reform. They're going to support the workforce and the affordable housing pieces, and they are going to be speeding up the development approvals. All right. So again, this isn't about demand, right? They're not saying, hey, we got a bunch of demand. They're saying we just need more supply. We need more supply. So this is not down payment assistance. This is not first time homebuyer credits. This is not rate relief. All right. This is about unlocking inventory so prices and rents can stabilize over time. All right. What this act is doing is it is pushing states and cities to allow duplexes, to allow triplexes, to allow ADUs, all right, in more areas. And we've been seeing this pop up, right, in Denver, where they're going through and they're saying, like, hey, we need to have more ADUs. What this is going to do is this is looking to reduce the minimum lot sizes, right? That was a big thing. It says, hey, you have X amount of space, and because of setbacks and because of easements and everything, you can't have another property on here. They're trying to remove that. One of the other things is they're trying to ease parking requirements. One of the things that was going through, and we saw this in Denver a lot, where maybe the yard was big enough. All right. Maybe you had enough yard to build an ADU, but they were like, you know what? There's actually not enough parking for all these cars that you're going to bring in here. And that was the reason behind it. They're like, oh no. If you have two bedrooms, we assume that two bedrooms equates to two more cars, even though it might be a kid or a study or an insert, whatever else here. So what this is doing is it's going to allow these duplexes, triplexes, ADUs. It's going to reduce the lot size minimums, and it's going to increase parking requirements. All right. So this is more properties that can be used, and they're going to go from illegal to legal and obviously financeable, right? You're actually going to be able to unlock financing to be able to do this. All right. So when we go through here, we're talking about ADUs. All right. What is this probably going to do? It's going to unlock some incentives, right, to build ADUs. It's going to have easier approvals for ADUs. And it's going to have federal support, right? Now we have federal support down to the cities and to the states. Now, what that does, who knows? Outside of we saw huge bipartisan agreement in this. All right. So who's this going to matter? Like, who cares? Well, investors, right? To where they can actually get more out of it. House hackers, right? To where you can actually go buy a house, have a property on top of it, do some other things. Multi-generational buyers now, right? To where we're going through and mom and dad, whatever that may look like, and clients that are offsetting their mortgage with rental income. Like this is pretty cool, right? Like if we go through and there's products that allows this to happen and it's being eased and we can actually do it in more areas, this unlocks a lot of stuff for our people. And another piece is just the faster approvals, right? As we're going through, shorter permitting. All right. So what this is looking to do as well is get the permitting moving quicker, less discretionary review where they're going through, as well as fewer surprise denials where they're going through and they're saying, you know what? I actually don't like the way that you did that, but it's to code. It's to code. It doesn't matter what your feelings are. It's perfectly legal. Let's get this thing going. So we're going to see fewer deals dying in the planning stages. We're going to see more predictable timelines and less holding cost risks, right? They're going to be able to build and not afraid that the city or the state is going to jack them up. All right. What else is it going to do? Well, this has a big focus on teachers, firefighters, nurses, trades, and entry level professionals. So it's going to go through it. Guys, this is a big, giant bill that is going to just open up a lot of things for us. This is going to create more opportunity where they're building like job centers, right? When they're going through, we have a growing suburb area. They're going to be able to do some more stuff with this. And obviously your benefit, like who benefits the most? It's going to be small developers, it's builders, it's investors, it's landowners, and obviously it's buyers who are willing to go through and to build on their land. And so some of the things that we should be looking at just as real estate agents, right? Because this is going to change this highest and best use conversation, right? The highest and best use, right? Well, like, can this lot actually support more units? And it's not about like legally feasible for the most part anymore. They're going to get rid of a lot of those restrictions. Is an ADU allowed or coming soon, right? And then could zoning change in the next 1 to 3? Like we should be looking at that, having conversations like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you're looking at this property and the lot looks like it could be big enough. We need to maybe reach out to the city and see maybe down the road that they're going to green light this thing and you might be able to build on this property. I think this is pretty cool, right? Like, this law is designed to make it easier to build more housing, especially smaller multi-unit and or accessory dwelling units. And over time, what this is going to mean is there's going to be more inventory, there's going to be more options, and there's going to be more opportunity if you're thinking long term, what can I do with this property? Guys, I think this is pretty cool. So if you guys want to look up more of this, again, this is the Housing for the 21st Century Act. And again, it went through huge, right? Like this is going through pretty quick. And we talked about this, a couple months back, a couple weeks back. Time flies when you're having fun. Is that what we're going to see is you're going to see more politicians get behind stuff like this because this is not a partisan issue, right? This isn't Republicans, this isn't Democrats, this isn't independents. This is the cost of living in a house is getting outrageous. Remember, the first time home buyers 40 right now, their down payment is 10%. So as we're going through and we're looking at these different things, we need to free up more ways to build. We need to free up more inventory. We need to free up more financial ability for people to go purchase. But let's go look at what Logan Motoshami says. All right. So lead housing wire analyst. And it says new listing data now negative year over year. But it's weather related. All right. So keep in mind, while we live in Colorado and you would expect us to get hit with snow, we really didn't. Outside of the playoff game where the Broncos at home lost. And I know that's sore subject for some of you still. But it says a major snowstorm caused notable declines in the housing inventory. New listings and pending sales last week. And it says mortgage rates remain stable near 6.15%. All right, cool. So what does he say? He says, hey, he was amazed that the housing market tracker didn't show much drama from the epic late January snowstorm that impacted much of the US, but today's tracker data got hit for sure. Okay. So what does he say? It says housing week data. Let's look at this thing. So as we're looking at the housing data, it says it fell off, which isn't a total surprise. All right. So when we look at this, guys, we can see that it's not a huge dip, right? We're not looking at anything astronomical. And so I think when we're looking at this headline and we can say, okay, so we saw inventory decline, look at year over year data. I think those are more the conversational points that we need to be having on social media with buyers, with sellers, with investors. As we're looking at this, guys, this is how I would look at the data year over year with everything year over year. I was literally having a conversation with my in-laws last night, and we're talking about what they're going to sell their home for. So my in-laws are going to be selling their home. We're going to be putting it on the market here next week. And with what that looks like, they're saying, well, hey, we don't want to lose money. Keep in mind that they bought their home in the early 2000s. There is no losing money. All right. And that conversation just keeps coming up more so and more so. And so when we're looking at this, we can't look over last month or over the last couple months, right? The bigger indicator year over year, but even more so, like how far back do we have to go in the years to actually find any real decrease or increase depending on what we're looking for? So if we were to look at single family inventory, here's 26, 25, 24, 23, 21, and 2022. Remember, 2022, we were coming off of a real low inventory, and you can actually see it. And then 22, it starts popping up because interest rates started going up. And so inventory started going up as well because it wasn't moving as quickly. But look at this. We have more inventory now than we have had since 2021. And that's more the conversation. I'm not worried over week decline. If we start getting less inventory than what we did in 2025, that's an issue. Why? Because if interest rates continue to come down a little bit and inventory keeps coming down, that means home prices are going to go up. All right, which leads more to the affordability issue again. So as we're looking at these are the things that we're going to continue to watch and continue to play and monitor as we're going forward. So we go in here, and here we are, we're this orange line. And so we're watching the orange line, and this did come down a little bit, right? So it's coming down. We're kind of right in where 2024, 2025 data is, right? Like right in here. So all this is saying is like, hey, less people put their home on the market. We didn't see a bunch of inventory fall off the board. We just saw less people. That's probably what we're really looking at with this right here, national single family inventory. It's because less inventory came online. Why? Because seasonality, right? If we're getting hammered by a snowstorm, raise your hand if like you're excited to go out and go look at homes, or pretend you're the seller and you have to disappear in the snowstorm while someone hopefully comes in their showing window, right? So this is what we're seeing. We're just seeing human nature saying, listen, I don't want to list in this. I want to wait till the snowstorm passes. And also because I'm worried that even if I do get pushed out of the house, am I still going to get all the buyers who would possibly be interested, right? This is just human psychology at this point. So as we're looking at here, this doesn't surprise us at all as far as the nation goes. I know we didn't see a whole lot of snow in Colorado. Here's your price cut percentages. This is interesting, right? So we're looking at this. You have your price cut percentages where we got 2022. And again, guys, remember 2022, broken record here, that interest rates are low, 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 and they start skyrocketing up right here. This is why you see price cuts start going. Price cuts start going. Why? Because the cost of money got more expensive. Well, why does that matter? Well, because sellers, historically speaking, become buyers. So you have a seller, they put their home on the market, and they put their home on the market to buy a new house. Well, if they didn't have their home under contract and they have the home that they want to buy locked in, well, what do they have to do? They have to start decreasing the price. So we saw this huge uptick because interest rates rose so quickly. They needed to do whatever they could because they didn't want to lose out on this house that they were buying, wherever it was. Well, let's go back in. Let's look at 23, 24, 25. All right. So you got 25, there's 24, there's 23. Well, as we're looking in here, here is your 32%, which is where we are right now. But what do we know? 1/3 of all homes, historically speaking, in what we would consider normal markets, take a price cut year after year after year. So 1/3 of all homes. Well, if we look at this and we just said, okay, so we have more inventory than what we did last year, but we also saw less inventory hit the market week over week and some year over year data. Well, what happened? Well, we also saw less price cuts happening. All right. So we actually saw less people moving to drop their home price. And so we're sitting at 32%, which is still 33. Let's round up. Let's call it 1/3 of all homes. But we did see a dip in an area where we kind of start seeing it fluctuate a little bit higher and start going up. It went down. All right. So we're looking at this and we're saying, okay, well, we're still right on track with historical data, 1/3 of all homes. Purchase mortgage application. All right. Looking at the graph, right? I look at the graph and I'm like, oh my goodness, what happened here? All right. Again, what I want to keep in mind is year over year data, right? That's the story. So year over year data, we still have more people raising their hands and asking their lenders, what do I qualify for? All right. That's the conversation. That is what this is. Now, keep in mind, this is not first time users going to go get a property. This could be refinance, right? There is some refinance data that is mixed into this. Like it doesn't extrapolate out that data. All right. So you have people refining, like that's kind of crazy to think about that like a 6.125 interest rate is worth refinancing to some of these people. Like crazy to think about, right? These people might have a 7 or an 8% interest rate and they're like 6%. Hallelujah. All right. The other thing that we're looking at again is these are buyers, right? These are people coming online. And so I think what's interesting and what's kind of some of the things that we need to be thinking about is again, we have 40-year-olds, and we know that the biggest demographic of these 40-year-olds is single females, right? We actually did see a demographic change. I was actually looking in your demographic change, guys. We're seeing single females is your largest buyer population that is coming online right now. And we're also seeing not single families. We're seeing relationships, partnerships where they have no kids. And so we've actually seen a decline in family with kids buying houses, an incline, right? I think what they call it a dink, right? Like a dual income, no kids, right? That's what the kids are calling it these days. And so we're actually seeing a bigger population of that purchasing homes right now. And so while we're looking at this, what are we seeing? What we are seeing is we're seeing these guys that are finally, right, they're 40 years old. They've been renting, living in mom's basement, avocado toast, whatever that may be looking like. They finally saved up their 10% because that's also the down payment that we're actually seeing right now. So they're saving up their 10%. And in the Denver metro, that's $60,000. When we're talking in Jefferson County, that's closer to $70,000. These people have finally saved that dollar amount to where they're comfortable. They've reached out to their lender and they're starting their process online. They're going to Zillow, not looking at a whole lot of Compass listings that are only on Zillow or only on Compass, but right, they're going through, they're finding the different inventory that makes sense. And that's where we come in. What are we doing? Do you know your people's 6-month goal, 1 year goal, 3 year goals in real estate? And are you their real estate economist of choice? Because if you're not having these conversations, they're going directly to the lender that they met online. And that lender probably has a referred real estate agent that they push all their business to. And so you're going to get cut out of the loop. And guys, if this hasn't happened to you, it will. It super sucks when your friends, your family, your neighbor, that you go to the barbecue, insert whatever here, and they use somebody that is not you. This is your call to action. Again, looking at this dip week over week, I do wonder, like, really, was it really that cold and that snowy to where people were like, I'm not going to go figure out what I qualify for? Maybe. Maybe. But at the same time, it's still more than what it was last year. So year over year, it's still up. And I know that 2 years ago data, it's still up. This has been inclining year over year over year since 2023. All right. We have more purchase application data. People are comfortable with 6%. Let's not get caught not getting into conversations and not getting into relationship with our people because that's rough. We look at weekly pending sales. All right. So weekly pending sales, we're right in the mix, guys. Like there's nothing special about this data as we look at this, even with everything going on, interest rates, snowstorms, inventory, we're right in it. So nothing crazy. We're not looking at anything and calling, foul on this. We're not going to talk about the 10-year yield. We're not going to talk about the treasury mortgage spreads. All right. So this week ahead. All right. So what do we have? It says, hey, we're heading into a big week, and that's this week. All right. Remember, this is rear view facing data. This came out Friday. So we're heading into a big week of data. The jobs Friday report has been moved to tomorrow. All right. And so we're going to get retail sales, numerous Fed speeches, and the existing home sales report will be reported earlier in the month. All right. Why do we talk? Why do we care? Why are we looking at a real estate publication talking about jobs report? Well, the Fed has a dual mandate. All right. So we have this Fed dual mandate, which a lot of people believe is crazy. And the reason why it's crazy is because we look at this as a pendulum, right? A teeter-totter. And so what is the Fed supposed to do? Well, the Fed's supposed to keep inflation low. All right. Cost of goods, they don't want your cost of eggs going up. Cost of gas, they don't want going up. They don't want anything going up. What do they also need to do? Well, they also need to keep people employed. That's why we're talking about jobs. People need to be kept employed. Well, when we're looking at this, what do we have? We have the Fed. What does the Fed do? They regulate the cost of money to the banks. And then what do the banks do? Well, they figure out what the cost of money costs them, and then they lend it out to other people. And so the cost of money just keeps getting more expensive the further away you get from the Fed, right? The further away you get, the more the cost of money is. And so what the Fed's trying to do is this. They don't want to lower rates too much because what happens if they lower rates? Well, people spend more. People already don't care what goes on their credit card and how much they're dropping on Amazon and doing all these other things. They're just spending money. So they want to keep the cost of eggs down. They want to keep the cost of gas down. What else? Well, if you were in 2021 in real estate as a buyer, a seller, an investor, a real estate agent, you saw in 2021 interest, the money, the cost of money went low, almost non-existent. And what happened? $100,000 over asking price. Waive all contingency. It got nutty. Yeah, we're like $2 extra for a 12 pack of eggs. Super sucks. $100,000, $150,000 more for a home. That got nutty. All right. So they want to make sure there. Well, then we look at the other side of things, right? So we're looking at employment. Well, why is employment in this? Well, because the cost of money, right, is going to these businesses. Businesses are going out, they're getting loans. Businesses are going through, they're doing these other things. And if people are no longer spending money, right, they're no longer buying the eggs, the widgets, the whatever. Well, how can a company go through and bring their profit margins up if no one's spending money? They got two ways. The first way is they can get out of their leases. But we all know we work in real estate. It's very hard to get out of a contract, right? No one's letting anyone out of a lease right now because we've seen this thing change over the years. And it is very, very hard to get tenants in these places, these leases. The easier way to cut costs is to fire people. So what happens is I need to be able to raise my profit margins. And so what can I do? I can fire people because I can't sell anything. So that's why this teeter-totter that they live on is very hard. They need to keep it balanced. They need to keep the cost of money just high enough to where no one's going out and spending a lot of it, but keep it low enough to where companies are still selling stuff and people get to keep their jobs. That's why we watch the jobs report. All right. We're very, very interested. Now, I know I've said this numerous times on this call. Like I said, this is my broken record. We're just looking at more information to be able to prove it. When we're going through, guys, I want everyone to understand this. We're never going to root for anyone to lose their job. That's super anti-American. But people without jobs is not a bad thing for your guys' business. I want to be very transparent about that. Why we go into a recession, your guys' businesses will actually pick up. That's just the nature of what happens. Now, I'm not saying like we go to war and everything crazy breaks out, like your business ain't gonna pick up then. But what I am saying is if we see a bunch of people lose their jobs, well, what does the Fed need to do? The Fed needs to cut rates, right? Because no one wants to see people jobless. We do not want to see families hungry. We do not want to see people without a house. And so what happens? Well, the Fed starts lowering rates, and then what more so happens is your more affluent people, the ones that still have their jobs, the ones that have been doing whatever on the sidelines. Now the cost of money is so much cheaper that they go out and they start buying more real estate. And this is why inflation, right? When we start talking about this inflationary data that we're really seeing, cost of eggs and all this, is a threat to democracy. Because what it does is it puts this bigger gap between your higher and your lower class, and it really just removes the middle class. It pulls them one way or the other, and then we get this bigger and bigger gap. Again, your businesses would be okay, but yet we're not going to cheer for this. It says we're going to get retail sales numbers, Fed speeches, existing home sales, right? And so it says the Fed speeches will become increasingly interesting now that Kevin Walsh has been nominated as the next Fed chair, guys. So this is right around the corner. This is also very, very important for all of us to keep in mind. We will have a new Fed president here in the next couple months, assuming that everything goes by smoothly, right? Because the president of the United States elects this person. And then they go through the Senate, right? We've seen those Senate hearings and everything, and they got to get confirmed. They have to be nominated. All right. So they get confirmed through the nomination. And now there's a new Fed president, a new Fed chair president. Well, why does that matter? That matters because if anything that we saw in 2025 with the current presidential administration is that no one gets tapped on the shoulder for any of these roles unless they align with the president. So, what has the president been saying that he wants to see? He wants to see lower rates. He says, I don't care if prices go up. He says, if prices go up, at least people will have the ability and they'll be able to afford money to be able to go do things with money. We will see rates go down. Now, guys, when we see this, remember, we're not the real estate agents. They're like, hey, the Fed cut rates today. Interest rates have dropped, because that's not how this thing plays out. All right. The Fed drops rates. They drop rates to the bank. Fed drops rates to the bank. The bank is not going to pass along that savings immediately. Why? They're not going to do it immediately because what will that do? Refinances, refi boom would happen. They don't care about the new people coming in and borrowing money. They're okay with that. What they don't want to see is the people that borrowed money from them a week ago, a month ago, 6 months ago come in for a refinance. That's why there's such a delay from when the Fed lowers rates to when it actually impacts your clients, the buyers and sellers. Because what they don't want to see is the banks actually have to refund the money for those origination costs and for everything else, because now it's a new banking product and they didn't have it and they weren't a consumer of it for long enough. All right. So again, we got the jobs report. He's going to keep an eye out for wage growth, job revisions, since most people have no faith in the headline data much anymore, guys. And again, we don't. It doesn't matter what the administration is. It can be Democrat, Republican, Independent, which we'll probably never have one of those. But what this looks like is whatever numbers that they want to put out, that's the numbers that are going to come out, right? Do we have great jobs? Do we have bad jobs? What are the things that we need to do? Because these are headlines that actually help or hurt their administrations. We can't really trust this. But it says he believes existing home sales data will be impacted this week, not only due to the snow, but the December holiday. And we'll have about 2 months of data that might start showing up with some snow impact. We'll play it out. We'll see what happens. But let's look at interest rates. So this is the rates of where your clients can be at right now. All right. So this is yesterday's data. And you see your conforming loan. This is at almost 6.1. Let's call it 6.1. Your FHA, let's call it 5.9. I know I just rounded down. Let's call it 6. All right. So they're both at 6. That's kind of where we're landing right now. They're at 6. It has gone up a little bit. This is 1 month's worth of data, right? So we're talking mid-January to almost mid-February at this point. And you can see it's a little rocky. We don't like this. We don't want rocky data. Rocky data starts spooking your buyers, which in turn spooks your sellers. And we also know that sellers become buyers. So when we start seeing this is what makes people want to start timing the market. Now, we don't see anything drastic, but we do start seeing it like it is ticking up like a little bit, right? Like we're seeing both of these go up and they come down a little bit, but they're still on this trajectory going up. We don't want this. Again, keep in mind where we are. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days out when we list a home and it's going under contract in a lot of these markets that we're in. So what does that signal to a seller? Well, if I list my home and I find the home that I want, I might not be able to move forward because I don't have an offer and I can't lock in my rate until we're going through. So, right, we're at 6%. And we're seeing it bounce up and down, and maybe it's going up and it's going up. And 60 days later, now we're at 6.2, and they have an affordability issue. And now they're having to downgrade their home. And this is what spooks sellers from putting their homes on the markets. We don't want to see that. And then with buyers, we start seeing these big dips. And what are they going to do? They're going to say, well, I'm looking for the best dip. I want to make sure I'm getting at the best interest rate I possibly can. I don't like the way that this thing looks. I'd rather see it a little bit more flat. But again, what we can do is we can also, with concessions and everything else, we're also seeing blanket offers with concessions around $15,000, which, as being an educated real estate agent in this market, these are some of the conversations we should be having with our buyers and sellers. Like, hey, What we do know is that we have the ability, more so than we've ever had in the past, to be able to come to the dining room table with the other party and to be able to get some concessions to be able to lighten the burden of the cost of money for you. And let's talk with our lender to see how much money we would need to buy down some points. How does that sound? Partner with the lender, allow them to have those conversations to show what those costs would be. And then we get to go out and negotiate, win for our people, repeat referral business.